My kids tell me that I clap loud.
That is a loud clap in a little box. Square box.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to Everyone Else Has a Podcast with JD and
Scott.
And it's been a long time since we've had an episode.
Yeah, but we still had a podcast. It didn't go away just because we didn't have it.
That's true. Also, we recorded a podcast that we decided to not release.
There's been a lot of crazy stuff going on in the last few months, and it seems like wisdom was to wait and see how things are going to shake out before we
commented.
Yeah, it's probably wise not to immediately jump in with opinions on certain topics.
So I think the last time we had that we aired a podcast was in October, before the presidential election.
That's right.
We had the election. Mm-hmm. Then we had all of the hoopla with the election. Then in January,
we had the January
6th thing on the Capitol. I don't even know what to call that exactly. Mm-hmm. And we were just like, we had just recorded an episode right before that, like a couple of days before that, and we had said a bunch of stuff, and then that happened, and we were like, I don't think we need to say anything right now at all, because we just don't know how everything shakes out.
The level of political in the United States that was already crazy because of the election went to a new level of crazy, and I would rather not get involved in that mess. So we could just wait that out, and then we can talk about the things that we want to talk about and not be overwhelmed.
And it will make us look a little bit smarter.
Because we were quiet, because we held our tongues?
Probably so. I think there's a book that has something to say about like being slow to speak.
Yeah. Well, there's
a lot of wisdom.
A lot of the topics that happened over the last 4 or 5 months, if you were to say your opinion about it, you immediately, half of your friends will be mad at you, no matter what you say. So you're in kind of a lose-lose situation with sharing opinions about some of these topics. It's third rail kind of topics where you're going to get electrocuted no matter what you say. So better just, if you want to know what we think about certain topics and you're a friend, then come and talk to us, and we'll talk to you about certain topics as a friend. But
and it's not that I don't think we're afraid to say what we think about these things, but I think it's just wisdom for us to be slow to speak and observe things, listen to things, and let our opinions form slower than it is just, with knee-jerk reactions like that.
Probably a rule there that everyone should follow.
Yeah, probably so. We've got 3 segments today that we're going to cover. We're going to have a current event segment, an entertainment segment, and then a faith segment. And so in the current event segment that we're going to kick off here, we're going to talk about the new Georgia election law, which I am less studied on than you are. So I'm going to let you lead this, but it's something you and I have chatted about in brief a couple of days ago, and so you had a lot more information about it than I did, and so what I've been able to just kind of add to the conversation will be what I think of what the actual truth is, because there's a lot of things that are out there in the media right now that I've been hearing that if you just believe what you hear out there, you're like, oh man, this is terrible, this is awful. But when you go and do the research like this guy did, you come to find out, it's not exactly as it's being portrayed by the mass media.
It's not, and this is one of those examples where probably a lot of the politicians should have just waited a minute,
or they should read the bills,
right? And I think many people are just out for power, and they're going to jump on whatever bandwagon is going to inform the narrative of everybody, right? But most people don't know what to believe. I don't know what to believe. I had to read, I think it's safe to say, dozens of sources. And
that's smart of you to do that.
Well, but I don't have the time to do that for every topic. I did on this topic because it was such an immediate divisive thing. Like all of a sudden you have Major League Baseball stepping in, and I don't care what Delta Airlines, who cares?
United Airlines,
First of all, Delta and United Airlines, nobody cares about your brand. All we care about is which one will get us from point A to point B fast and cheap. on Expedia.com. This episode brought to you by Expedia. I'm just kidding. It's not.
That would be nice, right? Expedia,
it would be nice.
Can we get some kickbacks?
That is the truth. Nobody cares. The only one that I actually care to choose to fly on is Southwest, because they tend to have better customer service, and I like being able to sit wherever I want to. But all the rest of you guys, I don't care, and I definitely don't care what you think about political topics.
Whether you align with our beliefs or not.
I don't, right.
It's just not.
It does not make me feel good to know that if Delta Airlines agrees with me politically. It doesn't. I'm not going to get the warm and fuzzies on that. And anyways, but yeah, I did do some research.
Well, look, real quickly, just a little side note on that. Why do you think that they would even make a statement?
I think that they're making that I think that all the corporations make those statements for the same reason that you were talking about 6 months ago or whatever, where they're trying to look a certain way to appease a certain segment of the population,
so that they can get money. That's what they care about,
right? They think that that's going to cause it,
right?
The problem is sometimes there's backlash, and if you don't divide people, like, you know, if you don't pick a side in the culture war, you still have 100% of the population that might buy your beverage, you know, because they're not mad at now.
Coca-Cola.
There's always going to be like the 2% of super crazy people on the right or the left that are like, I'm going to boycott everybody that doesn't believe everything I do. You know, I'm like, well, have fun on your commune, you know, like without Coca-Cola, whatever. But the vast majority of people don't care, you know, and they don't really care, and they don't need to hear from you. But you know, a very vocal minority of both sides want to hear whose side you're on, because they've picked a side. Yeah. Unfortunately, you know, you don't need to have a side to exist in this world, and it's better if you don't have a side, you know. On
a lot of things.
Yeah. I mean, yes, obviously Christianity is the side that we'd have to pick, but Christianity doesn't require us to not be friends with people who disagree with us politically.
Right.
So anyways, yeah, I did do some research. It was a waste of my life, except for the fact that I'm going to share it with you guys. It's not Jim Crow or anything else. And of course, many people could look at this and say, I just did that, huh?
That's okay.
Yeah.
You're petting your microphone. You're grooming.
Listen, guys, let me just fix this. Anyways, many people could say that they don't like what's in the law, and that's fine. You can debate that. And there's stuff that some people don't like on the right, some people don't like on the left. But it's not insane stuff. It's stuff that every other state has. There was some question about voter ID. That's the big one, right? Well, in Georgia, you can get voter ID for free. So there's a question there about, like, who doesn't have voter ID? Nobody doesn't have voter ID. Almost everyone that's eligible to vote in Georgia voted in Georgia. When I looked at the last numbers according to Google, I looked at Google and then I looked at Wikipedia. Now, somewhere there's a number variance there. But when I did, it sure looked like almost everyone that was eligible. And I think I heard Governor Kemp say something like 97% of eligible registered voters voted in the last election. So who doesn't have the ability to get an ID? Nobody does.
Well, here's the thing that we've been hearing. A lot of people have been saying, you know, listen, there's particular minorities that just they don't know how to get on the computer, or they don't know how to get down to they don't know where the DMV is, which is absolutely absurd.
No,
it's absurd, and it's actually insulting and very small-minded to think of people that way. And obviously I don't fit into one of those categories as a minority, but I'm almost offended for them to think that XYZ politician or celebrity thinks that, you know, a functioning human being that has a job and has a home and, you know, can do all these things, they don't know how to find the DMV to get registered, or an election commission, or know how to get on a computer.
It doesn't happen. Yeah. And that's a thing. I don't know if the people making this claim know anybody that's a minority, but growing up in Southern California, I never met anybody that didn't have the ability to get an ID and didn't have an ID. Like, everyone had an ID.
Right.
And I'm not talking about, like, I lived in the rich neighborhood. I'm talking about I've lived in the city. I've lived in the mountains. I've lived all over the place, at the beach. Anyone who wants an ID can get an ID. This is not even a hard thing to do. And frankly, I agree with you. I think it's kind of a, why are you saying that? Why are you saying some people can't get an ID? Now, someone in a hospital or a long-term care facility, maybe they're stuck in their house and they can't get out, or they're ill. Sure, those people might have a difficulty getting to the DMV or something, but there's charities and voter registration organizations that go out and help people like that too.
Right.
So, but even so, the fact of the matter is, about half the states, if not more than half the states, require voter ID anyways. And this isn't something that changed on the Georgia election. They still require voter ID. The difference is they want you to put the voter ID number on your mail-in ballot.
Yeah, or your driver's license
Or
number,
your driver's license. There's a bunch of different things you could do to get a voter ID. And that includes, by the way, like, you can get a voter ID by showing them, I had some notes in here, you can show them like proof of residence, like a utility bill. Like, it's easy to get a voter ID, but yeah, that's the main difference. Instead of trying to check a signature, which if I write my signature the wrong way and that poll worker looks at it and it doesn't look right, they throw it out. With the number on there, it's going to count. Like, it seems to me like that's not only not more secure, but it's more likely that your mail-in ballot or absentee ballot is going to be verified automatically.
So here's one of the things I saw floating around on Twitter about putting in your driver's license number on these mail-in ballots. They're like, well, there's different numbers on your driver's license ID. Like, how do we know which one? Like, someone could accidentally put the wrong one. I'm like, okay, it's the one that says DL right next to it, driver's license. No, it is just. It's thinking so small of people. It's thinking.
I've heard the term soft racism of low expectations.
What does that mean?
That means it's a sort of version of racism to think that to have such low expectations of people.
Right. I agree with that. But the problem is that the people that are saying that are the ones who are like pro minorities.
Well,
and so,
but it's just
what's
a misunderstanding. Because I don't know. I don't know what the problem is. I don't know if it's just a talking point and everyone knows
pro
it's
minorities.
not true.
I say that like I'm not a pro.
Everyone's pro minorities, but
I'm pro human being.
Saying that they're pro, but
right, yeah.
And if there is a problem with that, because there are people, again, Southern California, there are people that didn't speak English, in which case, when we would get stuff in the mail from the state, it would come in multiple languages, and it would come with pictures and diagrams. So it seems like an easy fix to include a piece of paper in there with the picture of the ID saying this number and highlight the number. There are ways to fix this without immediately jumping to this is racist or we're not going to let people vote. I don't see how that's going to cause people not to vote. And again, if they have such a high voter turnout in Georgia and they already required voter ID,
right,
it doesn't seem to be a real thing. Like, it doesn't seem to be something that's causing a bunch of people to be disenfranchised.
Right. And one of the other things I heard, a politician, I won't say which one, but a politician was complaining about how absurd it is that, we now can't, make sure that people have water in line. But there's no rule in Georgia election law. There's no law that says that a family member or a friend can't bring you a bottle of water or a sandwich if you're standing in line.
You can have the pizza delivered to you.
Yeah.
In line.
The only rule is that someone from a political, with any political party affiliation, like, they can't bring you a bottle of water or sandwich or deliver a pizza to you, but anybody else can. And there's no law that says that you can't bring your own pizza with you or your own water with you. So for that politician who is complaining about that, I just was like, man, like, these are the most simple things that are part of this, election law that's in every state. There's no state that requires you to not, no one can bring you a bottle of water. Right. That's absurd.
It's electioneering, because you can ask the question, why would a politician be handing things out?
Right.
It's because they want one last, lobbying, vote for me, vote for me, vote for me. I'm giving you free stuff. And every state has that. Like, in Tennessee, there's a rule that, you can pull up to your polling place and there's a barrier where that's the last place people with signs and shirts and things can be.
Right.
After that, the expectation is you can't bother me. I'm going to vote how I'm going to vote, and you can't try to harass me to vote that way or try to incentivize me to vote a certain way. And it was like that in California as well. It's like that in New York. It's like that in most states. There's a distance, and the distance in Georgia, I believe, is 150 feet. So outside of 150 feet, you can still get water from politician A or B. But who's gonna look at that and not see that I'm getting something from them? They want something from me. I mean, we all know that. Right. And there were some stories in the last election. I don't know if they're true or not, but you hear stories like this all the time where politicians are going to the line and incentivizing vote for them by giving free stuff away. And that could be a water bottle, which is not valuable, or it could be a gift card, or it could be something else where they're trying to incentivize the vote. Because the truth of the matter is, in many elections, people don't know who to vote for certain things. It's usually pretty clear at the top of the ballot who you want to vote for. But below that, if you're not voting all blue or all red, you don't know who school board member is or road commissioner. Like, you don't know. And so road commissioner gives you $20. Sure. I'm not saying I would do that, but I'm saying, I don't know who you are, so it'd be easy to think that's why electioneering is illegal. But the question that they're worried about is like, well, because Georgians have to be in line for 7 hours, they're going to dehydrate. But one of the changes to this law is that you can't actually...
Who's standing in line for 7 hours?
Apparently, there are some places where people had to stay in line for a long time. But a change in the law codifies that every single ballot processing precinct has to go out and check the time of the line like 3 or 4 times throughout the day, and they have to log it. And if your line is over a certain distance of 1 hour wait time, then that precinct is required to open another precinct before the next election so that they can cut down on lines.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yes.
That's fantastic. And the fact that there are places that people have to wait 7 or 8 hours in line, you have to ask the question, why is that? Like, why don't you have more voting places?
I'm going to guess it has something to do with the government running the election. Well, the government that is so good at running all of our programs.
The government is terrible at running everything, but not every place is like that.
No, I've never had to wait probably more than 30 minutes ever in my life in all the elections I voted in.
That's the same for me, and I'm talking about in the California. Okay, where we had millions of people surrounding me. We didn't have to wait that long.
Yeah.
Because there are other places. Do you have to wait in line sometimes? Yeah. 15 minutes.
Yeah.
20 minutes. I think that's probably around the most I've ever waited. But here's the other thing. That's because you had to vote on one day. But the new law in Georgia actually makes voting ahead of time a minimum of 17 days, which is more than the old amount of time.
Right.
It also codifies a guaranteed Saturday with the option of 2 more Saturdays and preserves Sunday voting. And so what you end up getting is 17 minimum early voting days.
So it sounds like this is actually making it easier for people to vote.
Well, you can debate the ID thing separately.
But that was already in existence.
It was, except for the mail-in. But the fact of the matter is, I think it was Atlanta Journal-Constitution or whatever. It was either that one or another one that had to fix one of their problems and actually say it was easier. Because Biden was saying, it's worse than Jim Crow. Which I'm like, I have read about Jim Crow. I wasn't alive. But it sounds a lot worse than the Georgia election thing.
Oh yeah,
and it seems like we're belittling the real Jim Crow when we try to. Same thing with the Holocaust. Everything is the Holocaust. Everything is Nazis. Everything is Jim Crow. It's not like that, and it's wrong to use those. But he was saying that it was Jim Crow because the time to end voting was 5:00, which is not accurate.
It's not accurate.
It's not accurate.
It's 7 to 7.
Right. Well, what it was is the law said normal business hours, which for everyone is not the same. So all it did was put it in writing that the law is 9 to 5 guaranteed. You can't close before that. Because what happens if normal business hours was 7 to 4 and in County X, and they decided to run their 7 to 4? Now everyone has to be open 9 to 5. And the counties have the option of being open 7 to 7, 2 hours before. And if you're in line by 7, you get to cast your ballot. But again, you now have 17 to 21 days of early voting. You now have no reason absentee ballot voting. Like, you can request an absentee ballot for no reason. You don't have to. It used to be you could only have it if you're like invalid, stuck at home, whatever. Now in Georgia, you can just request an absentee ballot for any reason you want to. And you can take and go put that in drop boxes, which are now legal. One every 100,000 people in each county gets a drop box based on your size. And so you're like, well, so let me get this straight. I can choose to do absentee for any reason I want to. I can drop it off in the drop box anytime I want to. Or I can go and vote absent early anytime I want to for almost 21 days. Or I can go on the day of. And if I'm in line by 7, I get to vote. So like, where is the limiting of access?
Yeah.
It's better access than before.
Yeah.
Whether you like that or not.
No matter what side of the aisle you sit on, this is easier voting than anything before.
It's more access than before. Now, there is some security things that I actually think are helpful to us. The ID number for the absentee, but they also said that every county is now required to publish their results by the type of vote, which I think is great. Because one thing we should all be able to agree upon with the whole mess with the election was that our trust in the election is worse than it was before.
Oh, certainly.
Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, because the previous time in Georgia was Stacey Abrams. So you know that the Democrats at that time didn't trust the election, and then Republicans or Trump Republicans didn't trust it this time. So better to have transparency. So now by 10 o'clock at night, the night of the election, they have to report absentee ballot totals, early voting totals, and day of totals along with their numbers by 10 o'clock. And I think that's great. It's a lot more transparent. It has a lot more security. So you can no longer say, we don't trust absentee ballots. Well, yeah, now you can, because every one of them is tied to an individual number. And if you get 2 with the same number, you know you've got a gap, right? And so I think that should help with trusting the elections more. So anyways, there's a lot more to it. It was pages upon pages.
Is there any specific other notable things that pop out at you?
One other thing that I thought was helpful is that just like electioneering, apparently some places were able to take private funds to help pay for setting up of the election and to run the election, like to hire poll workers and things like it. I think a special interest, even if they call themselves a charity, that's helping you pay for your poll workers is a bad idea.
Yeah.
I think it should be nonpartisan 100%.
Yeah.
And even as we found out, if Delta is not nonpartisan, then everybody is nonpartisan. And so I don't want anybody going in there. I don't want the NRA paying for poll workers in Texas. Would you trust, liberal friends, would you trust if the NRA was running the election in places of Texas, would you trust them more or less? Obviously, you would trust it less.
Right.
And if you had Media Matters running it in Georgia, you'd have less. And so better just to keep that out. So they actually they closed that loophole. It's now illegal. You can't take money from private individuals or organizations to help run for things. Anyways, there's other things, but I think even if you don't like it, it's clearly not as bad as people said it was. They should have waited. People shouldn't be chiming in on how it's so terrible. It's very much in line with what most of the states have.
When Delta Airlines came out and made their statement, and it's funny, right after that, like United Airlines felt like they had to follow suit as well.
I didn't even see, because I don't care about United Airlines. I don't care.
But Delta made this statement about all of this, and I thought, well, are they going to now make a statement about how unfair they think it is that we have to put in our driver's license number when we book a flight with them?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, it's just absurd.
It's dumb. Think about the things that takes a driver's license, ID, or passport.
Right.
A government ID.
Even some of the most simple things, like you can't buy a 6-pack of beer without showing your ID.
Cigarettes.
You can't. I mean, if you look underage, you shouldn't be able to go and buy a rated R a ticket to a rated R film without an ID.
A mature rated video game. Going to a concert.
You go into GameStop, they'll card you there.
You can't go to Major League Baseball without and will call without an ID. You can't open a bank account without ID. You can't do anything without an ID. You can't rent a car. You're not supposed to drive a car. I suppose people can break the law, but
no, they do.
Following the law, you need an ID for almost anything.
And everyone is able to do that.
Right.
Everyone.
Some people may not be. And there are some instances where if there are places that for some reason some people are not able to get a free ID, I don't know if that exists or not, but that should be the thing we're fixing. Not making the requirement to prove who you are, which an AP poll said 72% of Americans believe that showing your ID to vote is a responsible thing to do.
Yeah, I can't believe
that's the vast majority of Americans understand that you have to show your ID for everything. It is not a burden. If it is a burden in your location, we need to fix that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't show an ID.
Right.
Like, do you really want it so that teenagers don't have to show their ID to buy alcohol? Do you really want it so that anybody can, go open a bank account and you don't know who they are? I mean, do you think of the things that we would throw out if we said that, if we carried this argument out to the logical conclusion that having an ID or requiring an ID is racist or classist or something like that, or is against impoverished people? If that was the rule, we'd have to get rid of IDs for everything. And are we ready for a world like that? I'm not.
Yeah, I kind of like the ability to have the security that we do through it.
I mean, it just makes sense to me. I don't know why this is a problem.
Yeah. This doesn't seem unreasonable. Well, that's our current event segment.
It does, but it does fit with the whole don't talk thing, because I didn't post on the Georgia elections on Facebook. The place to talk about things is different too, but that was one of those situations where people should have just shut their mouth for a while and thought about it. But right now,
because it makes them look stupid. And one of the politicians that was saying all these things, that was in the media, in the news media, I saw them up behind a podium saying all this. They got their information from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, who actually published things that were incorrect and had to print retractions.
They did, yeah.
Of saying what we said here, and even the way that they said it was very not taking very much responsibility on themselves.
One of the ones that I saw that I thought was Atlanta Journal-Constitution actually says something along the lines of, it might not have been an AGC, but along the lines of, actually this expands the hours or something like that. And whatever company that was, I'm like, well, good for you. But the problem is, once you tell the lie for 2 days, even if it's only 2 days, you have millions of people around the United States that have heard this lie and are going to believe it, because good-hearted people don't want to stop people from voting.
Right.
Everyone in America should be pro-voting. And so when you hear these people that you trust telling you that this is going to stop people from voting, of course you're going to get angry about that. But putting a little paragraph at the bottom of your article that people are no longer going to read because it's not new anymore is not going to fix the error.
And can we just say how irresponsible that is for a publication just such as the AJC? I mean, we're talking about a middle school, newspaper. We're talking about the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and to do such poor reporting. You and I had a friend who just passed who was a reporter, and I just really appreciate his integrity and his willing to always really find the truth, which is what we should be in pursuit of always. Right. We should be in pursuit of what is truth, not just what do I feel about things. And so I mentioned Delta, about their statement that they posted, and I was waiting for them to, post something about, we don't think it's fair that you have to put, your driver's license number when you book a flight with us. Of course, they're not going to say that, but what about
have little badges to get behind security? And
right, yeah,
you shouldn't have to have certification to fly the plane.
Absolutely absurd. And then also Major League Baseball, who's decided to pull out their events because of this stuff too, which is absolutely absurd. Number one, they didn't do their own research. They were just reading the newspaper, which reported falsely. And number two, are they now going to condemn and shut down their events that they have in Cuba and in China?
Oh, please.
But
of course,
I mean,
they were responding to Biden. Biden told them. Well, actually, someone baited Biden with a question, which is one of the problems with the media right now. What would you support this? And Biden's like, well, yes, I would support Major League Baseball pulling that out, because he's already backed himself into a corner with with the other questions. But yeah, you're right.
I just wish everybody could have personal responsibility, even corporations, to not just fold so easily and actually do their homework and just do a few hours of research like you did, and who this affects in no way, shape, or form. But when you're talking about a corporation like Major League Baseball, come on.
The question, I mean, yes, and you're right, because it would have only taken the whole bill is 93 pages. That's it. I think it's 93, 98 pages. It's not that long. You could have read it worst case scenario, or best case scenario, you can talk to the people who did read it. Worst case scenario is making up stuff about it or just repeating things that people want you to say.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is there is a narrative out there. There's a narrative that's one side and there's a narrative that's the other side, and both sides do it because they both jump into like this culture war that everyone is in, apparently. But that's not the war that Christians should be in. And so we shouldn't be jumping into a war where we just pick a side and that becomes the truth that we believe because we want to believe that. We should be people who look at it and say, like the Bereans, like, hey, I'm going to trust but verify here.
You're right.
I'm going to look this up.
Right.
Before I republish your article, before I spread the lie, or even before I spread the possible lie, or even before I spread the truth.
Right.
You need to look it up first before you do that, because otherwise we're no better than all of the big media companies that we're all complaining about.
How would you like to be that church in the New Testament that Paul was like, good job, you guys, you got it right? Like, how would you like to have been one of those people and be like, yeah all right, I made the Bible. But how many times like growing up did I hear something at church that was preached, and then when I believed that thing because as a kid or a teenager, you trust your leaders and you hear things and you believe that and you go, oh, okay, and then you forming your thoughts about God and your theology based on what you've been told. But then you go back and you read for yourself in the scriptures what things say, and you read them in context, and you're like, whoa, that is not exactly the way that it was told to me.
Yeah.
So this kind of principle at work, it affects every area of our life, not just politics, but it affects our faith as well. It's like, hey, read the Bible for yourself. Read it in context. You don't understand something, find somebody that knows what they're talking about. Discuss things with them as you're formulating your theology. But Well,
this was one of the arguments that was made against having the Bible translated into the languages that people could read, is that if you translate it into the languages people could read, but they haven't had an opportunity to actually study to understand the language, you're going to get a bunch of really bad answers on what the Bible says. And this is true because freedom requires more work than security. Like, consider a culture that's completely secure, a police state. You don't have to do anything. You just have to do what they tell you to do.
Right.
But in order to have freedom, you have to be willing to put in the work. And in this case, put in the work to look things up, to find out what the truth is, to make decisions that are good decisions, smart decisions, wise. But you have to put in that work. In America, we want the freedom without the responsibility to look it up. We want someone else to tell us what we want to hear.
That's so true.
But we want to be able to do whatever we want to do. And that goes for the church too. The church spends way too much, people who go to church spend way too much time enjoying the freedoms without the responsibilities.
I'm sure you've heard this saying before. If you haven't, then bless your heart. We all have heard this,
bless
right?
Your heart.
Hurt people hurt people, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the same principle is at work in relation to what we're talking about here. Deceived people deceive people, whether they do it intentionally or not. And so that's why we have to be lovers of and seekers of the truth, not form our opinions so quickly, take time to flesh these things out before we get on Twitter, before we get in front of a podium and get broadcast to, millions of people across the world.
7 of our watchers.
Well, I'm not just talking about you and me, but I'm talking about everybody. It's like, I'm just so disappointed in some of the leaders that don't do the work. And it's not hard work.
Well, and
we want to be the first. There's this desire of like, we've got to be the first to say something.
Yeah.
That you don't take the time to really find the truth.
Yeah, and I think that's a tough tension because at some point leaders do have people looking at them to help them with some of this stuff. So there is a deadline on when they're going to stop waiting for you and then go get the answers from somewhere else. When you're talking about, let's say, a pastor or something. Pastors are people who go to church are expecting the pastor to help them out with understanding what's going on in the world a little bit. So if a culture event happens, they do want to know. But pastors do have a tendency to just say, well, you know what, here's my thoughts. Here's my thoughts immediately. Here's my opinion. and they're not thinking it through. And one of the hard parts is that, I could be wrong about whether or not this is a good law. But if I do the research, I'm probably not wrong on what the law says. And that can be the truth about the Bible too. Like if I do the research on what the Bible says about a certain topic, I can probably rely on the experts, commentators, people that have gone before us for thousands of years to get an idea of what the Bible's actually saying.
Right.
And now I can decide to not agree with that or to agree with that. I can be wrong about whether that's right or wrong. But the fact of the matter is we can agree that there are actual objective truths here. This law does only say the things that are in the law.
Right.
It doesn't say what your opinion is of the law.
Right.
And so in the Bible, same thing. The Bible says specific things. You may not agree with it, but that's irrelevant.
Right.
We can all agree the Bible says certain things.
Right.
And we need to do our job to get to those certain things. But a lot of times I think we put in the minimum amount of work so that we can find the answer we were going for. And then we say that's what the Bible says. Or we say that's what the law says.
Right.
And we're not right. We're just proof texting the law or proof texting the Bible.
Confirmation bias. We also go in search of just the one thing that we are looking for that affirms our already formed opinion.
Yes.
And that we do that in politics, and we do that in faith and with the scriptures. We do that in all kinds of areas of life. And we just shouldn't be that way. We should be humble enough to receive the truth and then and not try to find bits of the truth to fit what we want to have, or the belief that we've already formed. But when we find the truth, then we can go, okay, now I need to form my belief around what is true.
Right. And at the same time, we also need to be humble enough to know that it's true. There is truth, but we may not be able to understand it all ourselves. Like we may not be able to be certain. Like for instance, I'm sitting in this chair. I sat in this chair because I trusted and had faith that the chair wouldn't break when I sat in it. It could have though, right? I mean, it's totally possible that I could have sat in this chair and it just broke. No jokes. Okay, this is the COVID-19 right here. Come on, you got the freshman 15, you got the COVID-19. All of us got the COVID-19, don't lie.
I can't deny.
Maybe not you, but I may have gotten some of the COVID something. But anyways, the fact of the matter is a lot of times we can't be 100% certain about things. So we have to go with the preponderance of the evidence. And we have to go with as much as we can get in the level of certainty that we want to get to, like in statistics. We want to get as close as we can to 1, if I'm saying that right. But the closer we can get, the more trust we can give something that it's going to be true. Like the more times I've sat in this chair without it breaking, the more likely I'm going to trust it. You know what I mean? And but sometimes we have a problem in the world right now where we never sat in the chair of Georgia election law, but we trusted what people said about it anyways.
Right.
And so I'm like, where's the preponderance of the evidence? You don't have a preponderance of the evidence. And in fact, most things that happen in the world right now, whether that's Christian or non-Christian things, people aren't even trying to find it. And there's almost kind of in Christianity a bias that says that we should have faith without thinking, like this anti-intellectualism that comes in certain faith traditions, where I don't need proof about that. I don't need evidence. I'm just going to believe this. And I'm like,
well, that's existed for way too long, especially in my earlier years, where maybe I never heard anyone say that verbatim, but things were said that were like that. I remember I was leading a small group one time, and we were reading a book in this small group over a course of a few weeks, and we had some people that were reading the book, and it was challenging what they believed. It didn't say anything heretical, but it challenged their traditional way of thought about some things theologically. And it wasn't necessarily saying that what you thought theologically was wrong. It was challenging just how you came to that conclusion. Like, why do you believe what you believe? And they were just like, you know what, I'm just done with this book. This is just too exhausting. I don't want to have to answer these questions. And it wasn't because of, they didn't have enough time to do it, but it was just because they didn't want to do the work. They didn't want to do the mental and the emotional work. And I understand that not everyone has the same propensity towards that kind of thing. They're in personality wise, but if we're going to be strong people, if we're going to be strong in the church, then we've got to be willing to do that, even if that's something that we're not prone or have a desire to. You've got to be willing to sometimes.
Well, and that's right. And the Bible doesn't differentiate when it says, you need to know why, you need to have a reason for what you believe, and be ready to share it with gentleness and respect. It doesn't say outgoing people.
Yeah, study to show yourself approved if you're a green or a gold personality type.
Right. If you are someone who likes to study to show yourself. Well, you were like, well, what if I don't like to study? Well, you can't be approved. Sorry. It's like, no, it's not like that. It's all of us need to do it to the extent that we need. Now, someone who doesn't study a lot is probably going to come to a conclusion a little faster because maybe they trust the person who does. And that's okay. But you got to know, you got to choose who to trust.
Yeah.
Also based on evidence. If someone is constantly wrong about political issues or about Christian issues or interpretation, or they have false prophecies, don't keep going back to them.
Right.
But we still do. This is a weakness of Christianity. That's why I was bringing up the faith thing. We are lovers of the truth, so you'd think that would be our strength. But in reality, some faith traditions, it's a weakness because truth is seen as an intellectual pursuit rather than a faith-driven or emotional pursuit. And so it's more about like what you believe and loving and like an emotional attachment to things. But I mean, don't watch this part, Alice, but I've been married almost 25 years. There are times where I don't feel in love at that moment. Don't listen. But in those moments, your emotions won't carry you through the commitment that you've made. Right?
Feelings do not always tell you the truth.
They don't always work. Right. And then how many times did you fall in love with your high school sweetheart and it turned out that was a bad idea?
Right.
I remember Garth Brooks' song. I think God for Unanswered Prayers. Remember that song?
Oh, yeah.
He asked, yes, this is old, and I'm not a huge Garth Brooks fan, but I remember that was everywhere when I was a kid. And one of them was like, I think one of the verses was he asked God to give him a girlfriend or something like that, and he didn't. And he's like, and I'm glad I didn't. Yes. That's right, because your emotions can sometimes take you the wrong way. But emotions built on truth, now you're getting somewhere. Passion based on the truth is awesome.
Yeah.
Passion without the truth is a waste of everything.
It's reckless. It can cause damage big time.
Anyways.
Well, we kind of like just had a faith segment. That isn't what we
How dare us.
That isn't what we were going to talk about in our faith segment, but for time's sake, I think that was good. So let's wrap it up real quick with just our entertainment segment.
Okay.
So a few weeks ago, HBO announced that they're going to be, or they have already rolled out the Justice League again. It's the director's cut, the Zack Snyder cut.
Yeah.
And the reason that this is significant and different from the Justice League that came out however many years ago was it, in 2017 or 18?
It's been a minute.
Yeah, I think it was 2018 maybe.
Okay.
It's different because Zack Snyder, and you correct me if I'm getting this information wrong, or if you have different information than I do. Zack Snyder's the one that was hired to direct the film. It was his artistic direction.
Yeah.
He shoots the movie. Then the studio is having some conflict with him about how long the movie was going to be.
Well, actually, I do know part of this.
Okay.
I think that his daughter died.
Yes, that's true.
And then he had to step away as well.
So that's part of the story.
Is it also because they didn't like
So the studio wanted an hour and a half version, and they wanted more comedy in it. They didn't want it to be
Avengers.
as dark as They didn't want it to be as dark as what Zack was in his direction. So Zack was just kind of like giving them, keeping them at bay and not really giving in to their demands. But then his daughter did pass.
Yeah.
He walked away from the film. They brought in another director.
The black helicopters are coming to get us. Hurry. Someone call.
It's not those. The black helicopters are silent, remember? Anyway.
Oh, God, they're not even trying anymore. They're just like, we're coming and you don't even need a warning. Like, sorry.
That would be really awkward if you and I can hear it, but the audience can't. Like, but I'm sure that's bleeding to the microphone.
About? We should just do that one day. So, do you guys hear that?
And then just run away.
Yeah.
So Zack steps away from the film. They bring in this other director. I can't remember his name.
Joss Whedon.
Yes, and so he is tasked with shooting the movie over about half of it or so. Don't quote me on that. That's just what I
did a bunch of changes.
So a lot of which the actors weren't crazy about. Completely different film altogether. So this cut of the movie is supposed to be very different, and I'm excited about it. It's going to take a long time though, because it's not an hour and a half, but 4 hours long. It's a 4 hour
these dudes
movie.
watching this already watched it. We're the lamest people ever.
Right. We're lame because we haven't seen it yet. But
we have to figure out how to set aside 4 hours when we all got so much stuff to do.
Yeah, and we have lives outside of making this podcast and watching movies. So one of the things that we're going to try to do was maybe sit down with our boys and watch it. But I think Noble is going to be going over to a friend's house on Saturday where there's a watch party.
Watch it.
So he's going to watch it, I think, on Saturday, and which I'm kind of jealous of. But we got to find out when on our calendar we can sit down and watch this 4 hour movie. It's like the 10 Commandments. It's longer than the 10 Commandments. I think 10 Commandments was just
part of that. It's just like Justice League is like the 10 Commandments.
Well,
put that on the advertisement.
In length. Cecil B. DeMille.
It's Cecil B. DeMille's Justice League.
Yeah, Cecil B. DeMille's Justice League. That would be
just
a miracle.
A lot darker than your normal.
Charlton Heston as the Flash.
I don't know. He'd have to be like Cyborg because he's dead, but if he were still alive, fragile as heck. Replace that guy's body right away with a robot body.
We could do a deep fake of Charlton Heston. So there we go.
We could.
So anyway, that we're looking forward to that. Also, the other night, speaking of HBO, they're one of these streaming services that are getting a lot of movies and releasing them the same time that they're in the theater, or at least for the first month that they're in the theater. And if you don't catch it on HBO in the first month, then you're going to have to.
And you don't have to pay extra.
No, I don't. You don't have to pay any extra. And the reason I have HBO Now or HBO Max, whatever it's called, is because it's already included in my my phone service. It's like a kickback that I get from having AT&T, which otherwise I would not pay for HBO streaming service. It's just kind of a nice thing that would have especially for this kind of thing. So one of the other movies that they're streaming right now that's just out in the theaters is Godzilla versus King Kong, or Godzilla Kong versus Kong, whatever the title is. It's the new Godzilla and Kong movie.
Monster.
And my son says to me on Sunday evening, it's oftentimes it's family movie night on Sunday nights. He goes, let's watch this movie, Godzilla versus Kong. And I'm like, okay, you know that it's going to be terrible, right? Mm-hmm. He goes, oh yeah, totally. So we, sit down as a family, we're watching this. And as far as language and content, it's a pretty clean movie. Obviously there's violence between Kong and Godzilla, but
and the collateral damage of literally hundreds of thousands of people dying every time he shoots the breath out.
Well, most of it, there is a little bit of that at the very beginning of the movie, but there's most of the fighting, or at least what I saw. We didn't finish the movie.
Have you ever thought
it was out in the ocean?
But have you ever thought about that?
Oh,
every time we watch one of those shows,
even the Avengers, it's the first Avengers movie. I'm going, so how many $1 trillion worth of damage is happening?
Or
here
how
in New
many
York
people
City?
die? Like every car chase. I mean, you remember how they turn real fast and another car jumps up and crashes on? I'm like, that was a family just going to a soccer game. Do we not even care? Do we not even care? Anyways, that's why the Batman versus Superman opening was such a powerful opening.
Oh.
Remember that when Ben Affleck is observing Superman fighting with Zod?
Yeah.
And they're destroying the city and killing people.
And he's very upset about it.
He's upset and he starts running into the rubble. That was a very powerful way of addressing something that's not usually addressed. Sorry to be
that was
specific,
great.
But
that was great. It's a great observation. I remember that. But anyway, so we get I think we had 30 minutes left in the movie, and everybody was tired and they had school Monday morning. So they were like, this is not good enough to, kick in the stamina to watch it. We're going to go to bed. So we didn't even finish it.
An hour into an hour and a half film, and you're like, this is so bad, we're not even going to see how it ends. That's not a good.
It was terrible. It was worse than any of us thought it was going to be.
Really?
Now, the CGI and stuff was all cool and great.
I don't know what your expectations were. It seemed
we had incredibly low expectations.
Right. I mean, it's just a giant monkey fighting a lizard.
It didn't even meet those low expectations. and I felt bad for the actors. So there's a couple of sort of notable actors in the film. There's a Sarsgaard, not Peter Sarsgaard,
I don't know.
Anyways, there's another Sarsgaard guy in the movie, and then
the Friday Night Lights guy.
The Friday Night Lights guy plays a very small role because
he was in the other movie.
Yeah, he was in the So his daughter is the girl who plays 11 in Stranger Things, and she's in it a lot. And there's a couple of lines in the movie where I just said, man, I just feel so sorry that they even had to say that just now. Like, as a professional actor, like, did they like say that line and then just go, I can't believe I'm in this movie?
Like the cheesy ones from The Revenge of the Sith. Do you remember that? The romance between Anakin and Padme. Do you remember that? It was like so cheesy.
That was bad. But it wasn't uncomfortable like that. This was just...
Let me make that fly over here.
Yeah, that made everybody uncomfortable. This is just like you feel sorry for the actors because it's just like the plot is just so... it's like a thin sheet of ice on a pond in Middle Tennessee. You don't want to walk out there on it.
Have you seen the slew of movies from like Bruce Willis? Like he has like
that have been coming out in the last like 5 years or so.
Yeah, he has like 3 new movies a year. They're all rated 0 on the tomato meter, which is not always true, but I mean it's pretty accurate. And it's just this payday. He's just doing this payday, and and the reviews are amazing because after a certain amount of them, the reviewers are all like, Bruce is doing his I don't really care, I'm just here to get my paycheck face.
Yeah,
and he doesn't ever change his emotions, and he doesn't care about how terrible the lines are and how obviously cheesy everything is. I was sad to see that William Shatner had a bunch of horror films like that.
Oh,
because one of my things that I do is I look and see who the great actors, what their last film was, to see if they went out on a high note. And some of them are really bad. Some of them are interesting, like what's the guy that was in Harvey and in It's a Wonderful Life?
Oh yeah, Jimmy Stewart.
His last movie was Fievel Goes West. It wasn't terrible, but
so he was a voiceover.
He was Orson Welles was 1984 Transformers, and his was so bad that they had to digitally change it because he mailed that in so bad. So I look at these things and I'm like, what's their last movie gonna be? Yeah. John Wayne's was a great one. John Wayne's was The Shootist, and I'm like, perfect.
Good job,
because that
Wayne.
was a great film and a great way to wrap up that career.
So you're saying is Bruce Willis is the new Nick Cage?
Oh, yes, exactly. Yeah. And they're the same. And then you get these, and then you get lucky sometimes. You get like Keanu Reeves gets lucky with John Wick.
Yeah,
or back. Liam Neeson gets lucky with Taken or something like that.
Except he made 2 more of those and they were terrible.
Doesn't matter. He's
the first
making
one
bank.
was fantastic.
He's making bank.
He's made some good movies since then, though. Some decent ones, I should say.
Liam Neeson has?
Yeah, he was in that one movie that was okay called Widows a couple of years ago. It's not a movie for the kids at all, but he had a role in that. He wasn't the star of that film, but it was decent.
But it's a weird trend where some of these older male action, they're not even action people. Liam Neeson wasn't an action person. I mean, I guess Rob Roy or something, but most of the time not action, right? And you take them and all of a sudden they're just making all these like shoot 'em ups and you're just like, well, I guess you get another 10 years worth of films out of this guy, and he's going to keep making these unbelievable. Here's a 70-year-old fighting against a whole army of bad guys because at one time he had a specific set of skills, and you're like, but you're 70. I mean, I think Liam Neeson is 70. How old is he?
Let's see.
Oh, you're talking about this guy?
Yeah, I'm going to bring him up, but Liam Neeson, let's see. Liam Neeson is...
it's over there. Over there?
Over here. He's 68.
68.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, I hope that I can do gymnastics when I'm 68, but it's unlikely without robot parts.
So you mentioned guys who are coming back. You mentioned Liam Neeson. You mentioned Keanu Reeves. So here's a guy who was never even really coming back because he was never really anybody to begin with. He's had smaller roles.
Yeah.
But Bob Odenkirk is the star of a new movie called Nobody, which is very John Wick-esque. And I'm just trying to think, like, his IMDb, like, what like the first time I ever heard of Bob Odenkirk, he was in this HBO show years ago when I was a teenager called Mr. Show, and it was him and David Cross. So David Cross also had a huge role on Arrested Development for a number of years, and as Tobias.
I think I'm the only sarcastic person in America that didn't watch that show.
Yeah, you probably, it would bless you if you did. But anyway, Bob Odenkirk, he's never really been in anything major. Now, he was the star. He had a supporting role on the show Breaking Bad, and then he had a whole spinoff that was just him called Better Call Saul. And I've watched. I'm not current
this
on.
Is the Better Call Saul.
Yeah, this is the Better Call Saga. So, but even that show isn't like huge. There is, the cult following of Breaking Bad that probably maybe not even all Breaking Bad fans watch Better Call Saul, but some. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest thing that I know that he's been in. He was in the movie Nebraska a few years ago, and I never saw that.
No, none of
even
us,
that was
including all 7 of those people.
It was critically acclaimed, but like, where is Bob Odenkirk come from? But my understanding is that he's getting a lot of fanfare for Nobody.
Well, let me ask you a question. Is this made by Europa Films? Or I think that's the right one, Europa Films. Are
you talking about Nobody?
Yeah, is Nobody made by them? I'm pretty sure, I don't know if that's the exact name, but it's at the beginning, it's like a fairy with her wings come out and she's floating above water. I think it's like Europa. And the reason I ask that is because a lot of these films are done by people like Luc Besson, and where they're these like crazy action films and then we're just plugging in big U.S. actors or formerly big U.S. actors,
sure,
and they're going in these action films. I think that Luc Besson was. Let me look and see. We're like doing research on here. Now, Luc Besson also did Fifth Element, I think, and
Bruce Willis, wasn't that right?
Yeah, he did Lucy. He did Leon the Professional, Valerian. I actually liked Valerian. But my point is that there's a whole mess of these films. The Transporter, Taken. Okay. This is all Luc Besson.
I saw
Taken
Transporter,
2,
the first one.
District 13 was fantastic.
Didn't see it.
It's a French language film, but that's one of the first ones with parkour in it, and it's just stunning because it's one of the first times many of us were ever introduced to that, early 2000s, and it's just like dude's running up a wall and jumps through a hole, like a little window like that big, and I'm like, what just happened?
He just Jackie Chan'd it.
Jumps off buildings, and like it's like it goes wide view, and he's literally jumping looks like 1,000,000 feet, and you're just like, how did I say literally looks like? That seems wrong grammatically.
Looks like. But anyways, you're one of those people that says literally in front of everything.
Literally,
it's not literally.
I'm literally one of those people. But yeah, he did a lot of these films, and then you end up looking at him, and you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. And now there's a bunch of them that are copying him. Nobody's not one of the ones on here, but or he's not a Luc Besson one. But it's that same genre of like take a big name, and China's doing it now too. China had who's Jason Bourne?
Yes, Matt Damon. And
they put him into like The Wall or something like that, where he's fighting against monsters with a bunch of...
Never heard of this.
You never heard of this? The point I'm trying to make is...
Oh, is this coming out soon?
No. It happened a while ago. And it wasn't made for us.
Ooh, oh.
It was made for China. And
so
and it was
payday
exciting.
For Matt Damon.
It was exciting for for them to have Matt Damon come out, and he's the only American in the film, I think, and it's just like a cool crossover event, and anyways, this is what I'm talking about. I think those kind of films are like that, where it's like it's not really made necessarily only for a U.S. audience; it's made for the European audience or the Chinese audience or something.
So anyway, we got to find some time on our schedule.
Great Wall. It's called The Great Wall.
The Great Wall,
2016.
Oh,
it was forgettable.
I did start that movie, and it was so terrible. I don't know if I made it about 20 to 30 minutes into it.
So it was another Godzilla?
It was terrible. I felt, and it was like, why, Matt Damon? Why'd you do that? It must have been because he got just paid tons of money.
Yeah, it was no downsizing. Just that was a terrible film.
Downsizing?
The one where he gets shrinked.
He does?
Yeah, because they figure out that if people want to retire and they want to have like a majestic.
I didn't see that either. What movie is
you're
that?
Missing that. It's called downsizing. Don't watch it. It's dumb.
Okay.
It's totally dumb. But they get shrunk.
I'm so glad I've been saved from these stupid movies.
Awesome environment where they retire, and it's like everything is. They have an abundance of everything because they're little.
Because doll furniture is so much easier to manufacture.
One bottle of wine will feed all million people for a month. It's like, anyways. I don't know who drinks a bottle of wine for food, and if you do, there is help for you.
Yeah, we call this hotline. All right, well, thanks for everybody watching. Everyone else has a podcast. This has been great to be back with you. We hope that tell your friends if you maybe, or tell your friends don't listen to us. I don't know. We're so self-deprecating on this.
Have you considered giving people bottles of water so they watch our show?
Yeah, I should. I should give them $1 gift cards.
Less than $1 in New York. That's the limit. You can only give up to $1. Or
99 cents.
99 cents.
Who is going to do anything with 99 cents in the state of New York?
That's just a loop.
What can you do? Buy a stick of, spearmint gum? I don't know.
You can give a whole Tic Tac.
All right. Well,
thing, just one.
Thanks for listening to Everyone Else Has a Podcast. Maybe someday you'll have one too.
Bye.
There we go.
Okay, good.